pleasure to be here today. The music is powerful. I'll tell you why the music is powerful, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are joining me today, and I am Fayne Thompson, your host today on this Fayne Thompson live cast. The reason why that music is so important is because it sends the message. It sets the stage where I want to go and where I want you to go with me. Today, it's going to be a special show. We're going to do a series of 3 shows, and then we want your reaction to help us out, to give us an indication as to whether or not you want this kind of material on social media. We want your reaction. I'm going to give you a series of telephone numbers. Mr. Producer, you got to give me our local number, and I'm going to give you another number. 2 numbers, 556-6894. We are live. We are live today. 556-6894. You can get us by Viber. That's a Viber number only. And you'll also get us on 465-0131. You can also get us on Facebook. This is going to be a multi-platform show presentation, and we want you to take part. Now, I'm told on a constant basis that I speak too quickly, especially by the producer. So what we're going to do today is to slow down and to try to lay some things out properly so you understand basically what we're all about. We're going to be an hour to here today, but we want you to join us as I try my best to share with you where I am on a number of issues. Now, a number of you said to me, Fayne, why don't you come back and do certain things and do this show, do a show, etc., etc., etc. This is the time for you to show me whether or not the material that I present is something that you can enjoy. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you at the outset, this is my series of tests to see how we do with the material that I think is topical. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I come from a different background. You ain't gonna hear me talking about who's sleeping with who, sex and who, etc., all that, and blah, blah, blah. That really is foolishness. In fact, some people say it's nanny. I don't do all that foolishness. But you can hear me speak to the issues which I think are important and which impact our country. Now, I have been silent, and many ways coming back is something that I decided to come back for, because all I hear is nonsense sometimes on some of these shows. The pettiness about who's sleeping with who, the simpleness. I want to be able to have a show and a presentation that you guys can understand and that you guys can critique and join in on and moving this country in a different direction. So you're going to see clearly from the outset, I take a different direction. Today's going to be more informational as we lay out the next 3 shows. I'm going to be here between the hours of 3 to 4:30 or thereabouts, 3 to 4, today, on Friday, and on Monday of next week. And it's going to be important for you to let us know what you think about how we have shared with you the information which I feel is going to be topical. Now, on everybody's minds, as you know, is this conversation known as Bahamas Power and Light. And before I even get there, I have to at least give you the background as to how we would have gotten here. James Smith, the former governor of the central bank, has said, and I quote, "It's a national emergency, the sort of thing where you break the rules to fix it. You blow a hole in your budget." Now, what is he talking about? He is talking about first recognizing how serious this challenge is that we face, called Bahamas Power and Light, stroke BEC, because it's really BEC stroke Bahamas Power and Light. Bahamas Power and Light, as I understand, is a management company. But it's a very serious business because it's determining the decisions which are being made in this corporation are affecting us on a daily basis in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So much so that we have to change our lifestyles. Some of you are spending plenty time on the front porch, just catching the cool breeze when the lights go off, especially at night. Some of you, the big on, can't work outside because, of course, you're outside. There's a bunch of mosquitoes. And as the summer worsens in terms of the heat complement and so forth and rains, you'll have more and more of that type of irritation, especially with the mosquitoes. So that's what we're going to be talking about. BPL and how this whole FRACA, F-R-A-C-A, is going to affect our lives. Remember now, our numbers for you to contact us on, and you can reach me on Facebook if you wish. You can try to get me on Facebook, but remember our numbers are 556-6894 by Viber and also 465-0131. You can call me on my phone, and if we can, we'll try to get a hookup so that you can share with us today. In 1967, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas was not even in its infancy. It was going through a transition. Across the world, the winds of revolution and change were blowing. People were demanding their independence. Countries were becoming free. Theretofore, countries were not free for their people to express themselves. The majority of Bahamians did not have that freedom to walk and talk as they pleased, to live and work where they wished, etc., etc. Most of you know the story. Too many of us do not know the story. Against that background was cast a number of ideas by, at the time, a political organization whose name really is not important for the purposes of this conversation, but we'll mention once or twice, the PLP. It was cast by the PLP that a better day should be crafted for Bahamians, in particular black Bahamians, and also white Bahamians. In 1973, this dream was realized ultimately, not just by winning majority rule in 1967, but by achieving the confidence of our people so much so that we could actually establish the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, an independent and free nation. Fundamental to that development was the idea of Bahamianization. And Bahamianization was about putting Bahamians first, black and white, Jewish, Chinese, Greek, whatever, putting Bahamians first. And by putting Bahamians first, that meant that the corporations, the institutions, the policies that the government at the time wanted to put in place were designed to redress a 400-year wrong, a wrong which had spanned hundreds of years, where the majority of Bahamians did not have the right to live and work and compete equally on the same footing. That supposedly changed. The Progressive Liberal Party touted Bahamianization. Words like the square deal, etc., became commonplace. That is to say that everyone would be entitled to a piece of the pie on the same footing. Important, again, to that particular development was this notion of Bahamianization. Crafted against that background was the idea that we needed corporations to provide for the needs of our people. So aside from the multiple institutions that were established, national insurance, etc., we also expanded on the work that BEC at the time was doing, that the Bahamas Electricity Corporation was doing. It was crafted to provide, for example, something that's essential, which is a social service, which is electricity, and so forth. Over the years, many permutations of this BEC have been managed by Bahamians. Most recently, over the past 10 years, we have seen BEC struggling, well, more than 10 years, 10, 15, maybe 20 years, struggling with the provision of generation services to the people of this country. Generation services meaning the provision of services, electrical services, electricity services for our people in Nassau, in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, in New Providence. We, for the first time, some 20 years ago, began to hear about the aging engines, generators, which were supposed to provide for our needs in terms of a consistent supply of electricity. Now, if you live in New Providence, you became accustomed, did you not, to a constant provision of this supply, with very few, but as time moved on, disruptions to service. Bahamians, especially New Providence, became accustomed to a consistent and regular supply. Of course, there were outages. Of course, there were shortcomings. But never to the point where it could be said that those shortcomings and those outages were affecting the way in which Bahamians lived. That has changed. Over the last few months in particular, we now hear again, against a background of all the problems that we've been hearing about, and I want you just to look at the screen behind me. We've been hearing about the difficulties that BPL have been having. This is nothing new. The PLP and the F&M both have had this problem. Some of the more recent concerns was the fact that the energy plant, which is at Blue Hill Roads and the various locations, are now aging. They are aged. Not aging, they're old. So much so that they're breaking down, that the engines can no longer simply be, that the engines simply cannot be replaced. They must now be, they just can't be repaired, they must be replaced. A new company was formed, a new management company, BPL stroke BEC, and the whole idea behind the formation of this company was to provide excellent Bahamian-led managerial services to power and manage BPL BEC. Recently, over the last few months, a new policy was determined, I guess, because the government finally decided it was a time to actually move ahead with trying to, renew or replace certain parts. That a comprehensive reform, a bit of work was to be done for BPL. And We're going to we're going to see a few articles which hopefully remind you about how that's been going on over the last few months. A new management team has been brought in. We know about the difficulties that BPL has been having in terms of its management. Over the last 6 months to a year, they've changed management once or twice. So we know that electricity services, or the provision of power in this country, has always proved difficult for the Bahamian people. Today, we find ourselves in a vortex of worsening conditions because the government has decided that it's now time to construct and to put in place a new power plant. Now, one suggestion is that this will take a period of time. But in that period of time, certain things we were told would happen. One was that power generation would not be consistent, and that there would be outages, and that there would be load shedding, etc., etc., etc. Now, Mr. Peter Turnquest had the foresight to say something as silly, essentially, as it will simply provide an inconvenience for our people. And we realized immediately what the difficulty was. The government, I guess, seemingly trying to decide to stick within the parameters of a certain expenditure of public funds, did not want to do anything to disrupt their plan, which was to redesign the power plant, redesign electrical provision and services without having to spend more than the amount of funds that they had allocated for it. That has now posed a tremendous difficulty, because we see that in the absence of a decision to widen the scope of what we're supposed to be doing in the Bahamas Power and Light, load shedding has become the norm. What is load shedding? Load shedding is the idea that because we cannot provide, let's say you have a car, and that car needs drives a certain mileage per hour, and you're only using, you can only use a certain amount of power which is needed to move that car along. Then there will be certain parts of that engine which will suffer. That is to say, power will go to the essential parts of the engine. In many ways, this load shedding is about ensuring that the megawattage that we have available to power New Providence is used fairly by shedding the amounts of power that you allocate around the island, to ensure that everybody gets roughly the same services, defective services, but the same services with the same period of time for which load shedding is allowed. That's been causing tremendous difficulties. And there's no question that the recent public pronouncements coming from the Minister of Public Works, where he says that he did not feel that there was a crisis. The recent comment by Mr. Peter Turnquest, where he said that that's simply an inconvenience. And the more recent comment by the Prime Minister, that he now recognizes that this is more than just an inconvenience, and it's more than just a simple case of being inconvenient, that it's a crisis. We're seeing a change, a shift from there being nothing to really worry about to Bahamians now raising enough hell to get this thing done, get something done. The Prime Minister offers that there will be relief. Now, one of the reasons why I set the stage about BPL the way it is for this reason. To understand where we've come from, you have to understand where we are, you have to understand where we came from. There was a time in Nassau, a recent time, when this was inconceivable. That what Bahamians are going through was an impossibility, that somehow on a daily basis we would be limited in the use of our electrical services. Some people say that we are a spoiled people, that we should expect no more, because in many Caribbean islands we should be grateful. This is what some people say, because we get what many people in the Caribbean do not get. But that's foolishness. That's just nonsense. Because to my mind, it's something which makes no sense. We are accustomed to a certain level of provision of services. We don't get it free. Then we ought properly, in my view, to continue to get the services that we pay for. Now, just recently I wrote an article, and I want to share with you the nature of that article. It's a friendly letter which I wrote to the Minister of Public Works. So it's on the screen if you can see it, just above my right shoulder. And what the article does is it actually deals with some issues which I want to share with you for this particular show that I'm going to do today. It's a friendly letter which I wrote to the Minister of Public Works. One of the reasons why I felt compelled to start the shows that these shows that I propose to do, and to start with this particular material, is because it was a friendly letter to the minister, which many have perhaps misunderstood. But it was a friendly letter, but one which was very frank. And I'm not going to go through the details of why I said certain things, but I'm going to be more specific in terms of, I'm not going to go through each line, but I'm going to just share with you. Essentially, I said to the minister, first, that I very rarely seek to criticize policymakers, because policymakers have a difficult job in terms of providing the services they provide in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. As elected officials, they are bound to get it right. You don't have a second chance. You got to get it right. This minister, at some point, I think, was heard to have uttered the words or the expression of the statement that there was no crisis. I started my article by saying that I must take issue with Minister Desmond Bannister for that. Because if I'm going to be honest and speak truth to power, as I said, the crisis at BPL is real, unreal, and existential. The crisis at BPL for Bahamians is real because we've never gone through this before, and we should not be expected to go through this before. We are dumbing down our experiences in this country if it is somehow suggested that it's a mere inconvenience and we should find a way to cope with it. So it's a very real crisis. Bahamians are feeling it. I likened it to the crisis which was caused by the roadworks of, I call it disaster, led by the former Prime Minister Ingram. It seemed that against a background of having to redesign our roadworks in New Providence, which worked very well today, in the most callous way. Many businesses were destroyed, persons' lives were just willy-nilly disregarded, and there was tremendous disruption on the streets of New Providence. So much so that a song was crafted. Now, Solo, I'm sure, has had many songs done too. A song was crafted to explain why this was so serious. Remember that song, Dig Up, Dig Up, Dig Up? That became a popular song. That became a statement of the times, the frustration that the Bahamian people were experiencing by the way in which the roadworks redesign project was going on. I mentioned that in the article because I wanted to say to the government in power, and I also want to share with my good friend, Desmond Bannister, that there was no need, having regard for what we know about the way in which these things happen, for BPL essentially to shut down the regular provision of its services to achieve a particular end, which was the redesign of a so-called plant and the emplacement of more engines to power BPL. Now, this is important because, I know many people, I've spoken to many people, and they have all said to me, this was not necessary. So I said immediately, sorry, Minister, I do not believe that it should take until December the 15th for the completion of a new plant. The city of New York, who had a blackout a few weeks ago, if you recall it, took a mere 4 hours for the completion of repair work to their generation problems in the city. A city of 8 million people. Therefore, I could not understand why outages in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas should drag on for the way they did. This is going to be important that you all get all this as a background. I could not countenance why in the circumstances there's no compensation being offered to Bahamians. That there's no compensation being offered for the Bahamians, the taxpayer, for this inconvenience. You just can't turn my light off willy-nilly and expect me to pay, for example, the account on time each week or each month because you have the monopoly position of hostaging me, so to speak, to the service that you provide to me. Holding me hostage to the service that you provide to me. Shame on BPL. Shame on BEC for allowing this to happen. And again, I had to put this against the context of the fact that this particular minister is my friend. But that ain't got nothing to do with nothing. Because if I was stepping on the line, I'm sure he would say, Brother T, Fayne Thompson, you got to get it together. So I'm saying to the minister that there was no reason, looking at the way in which this happens, looking at the experiences around the world, that Bahamians had to be subjected to the terrible experience of BPL, BEC, shutting down willy-nilly for 4 months against a so-called background that we were redesigning the energy plant. The second part of my particular article was important to me because I want to explain this one simple point, which is that I was reminded of a book by Naomi Klein, and I like to teach sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes when I do these shows. I'm reminded of a book called The Shock Doctrine, a book by a very well-known Canadian writer. Her name is Naomi Klein. You see, we try to read Bahamas, we have to read Bahamas, we got to read. We have to understand how it is that the governments, not just the PL, not just the FNM, have gotten to the point of using BPL each time a new one comes in to first raise the alarm of a problem and then seek to transform BPL within a period of 2 to 3 years, and then the next one comes in and they do the same thing. And after having read this book a few years ago, it dawned on me, sitting back thinking about this last week sometime. Listen, this is nothing new. Governments, cynical governments in the third world and the developing world, use the very idea that urgent change needs to take place or reform needs to take place as the means by which they soften up their population to do other things. That book that she wrote by Naomi Klein, an excellent book, was known as The Shock Doctrine. A monumental piece of work, one which traces the legacy of neoliberalism. Something that you guys, see, don't worry about these words. You have to, at some point, ladies and gentlemen, you got to stop sucking your teeth anytime you hear a big word. You got to open up the book or Google it, and very quickly it's explained. Neoliberalism is the idea, is the practice, is an economic practice which says that governments prioritize things over people. Things over people. It's been practiced in the world, and especially in this part of the world, since the 1980s, thereabouts, and more so in Latin America and then in the Caribbean, really since the early 1990s. It is an economic idea which has been practiced and debunked in parts of Latin America, as resulting in the so-called impoverishment of people, or at the altar of essentially markets and what they feel and governments determining that what is more important is the market, not the people, or the economy, not the people that it seeks to serve. It's a very old economic idea, again, something which has been debunked in many, many parts of the world. But it's also known as privatization. Privatization of our assets. This book by Naomi Klein actually identifies that this practice started for governments in this region and really in the world in the mid-1980s, and the Bahamas jumped on board somewhere in the mid-1980s, 1990s, and began the very practice of these sorts of ideas in the provision of services by our national corporations. So, for example, an important part of this headlong drive towards privatization is the selling of national assets, the whittling away of workers' rights, the reduction and the liberalization of our economy for foreigners, etc., etc., etc. It's all part of the same economic practice known as neoliberalizing, but forget it, call it voodoo economics, which politicians have embraced since the 1980s, and has become part of their economic dogma. So much so that our government in the Bahamas today does not even believe that the state should play a progressive role in investing in our country to protect us, save and except in certain industries, which industries themselves are now being privatized. A classic example is BTC. So what Naomi Klein's book reminded me was that this was nothing new, other than a cynical, fake attempt to continue the practice which successive governments before the FNM have started. You see, the PLP is no better than the FNM in this regard. And ain't no other government's been in power, ladies and gentlemen, so I can't call the DNA name. The PLP and the FNM have embraced this new economic dogma, so much so that something as simple as Bahamianization, Bahamians being first, protecting our corporations, protecting the unions, protecting the great gains of majority rule are being turned back all at the altar of market fundamentalism. And that is to say, the selling of our assets as a means by which we develop our country. So what do we see has happened in BTC? I don't want to digress to BTC very quickly. BTC has shown us what that has meant for our people. Privatize is now resulting in a BTC that we no longer recognize. Yeah, thanks for bringing it back, Mr. Producer. BTC now is a corporation we do not recognize. One of the most effective and efficient telecommunications corporations in the Caribbean is now being characterized laughingly by its CEO in the Bahamas as being on the decline. $200 to $100 million in losses over the last 2 years. This is by Mr. Sinclair. These are his words, not mine. Mr. Sinclair. So you see a consistent trend which is developing in our country of more and more the sale and commodification of our assets as a means by which we develop our country. It is voodoo economics. It is voodoo economics. It is lazy man economics. And as part of the overall policy initiative, the Bahamas has identified cherry-picked industries to privatize the so-called power our development. Fellow Bahamians, our options are clear. Our options are clear. Ms. Klein explains the practice, and she's not the only economist. Our options are clear. We have to decide where this will continue, how far this will go, and where this is going to. Privatization as a mode of economic development is actually touted by Mr. Peter Tengues. He said as much in a video, which I'm going to pull up for you to see, as he then was the so-called Shadow Minister of Finance, where he spoke about all major public corporations, or most of them, being privatized. What BPL is experiencing is its intentional downsizing for its privatization. And that's not going to give us better service. It's not going to protect the jobs of Bahamians. And it's not going to enhance the ends of majority rule. It's not going to enhance the job of the whole issue of majority rule. The neoliberal privatization train wreck marches on. You see it. And I want you guys to get a chance to look at this. You see it. Lazy politicians are softening us up for the further privatization of this community. That's one point. But these are some of the problems that are attendant upon that so-called march towards greater privatization. When we get fed up enough, I agree with you, Melanie. When we get fed up enough, we will stop this. We will step out under the banner of a group of people who are committed to ending this headlong pursuit or crash towards the netherworld, because it does not offer for the development of our country. That all we seek to do is to sell everything that's not nailed down, and even those things which are nailed down. Seemingly we want to continue with that particular process. I'm not going to belabor the point 7 except to say that I hope we've been able to bring together, and we're going to be here for another 20 minutes or thereabouts, to bring together the important issues which explain to our people what we must explain. And ladies and gentlemen, stop saying that you don't understand these words. That is laziness. Please try your best to pick up Google these things. They explain to you what's going on. You see, BPL and BTC are essentially different stages of the same process. BTC has been privatized. Now it's being gutted. And you saw what has happened recently. BPL, BEC is about to be privatized. And it will also be gutted. Will that result in better services for the Bahamian people? Will that result in lower costs for the Bahamian people? Will that result in a continued and better service for the Bahamian people? This is what BPL has been all about. And this is why I intervene in this conversation. Now, James Smith said on Wednesday of last week, was it? I think it was, that it's a national emergency. The sort of thing where you break the rules to fix it. You blow a hole in your budget. My good friend Mike Larry on Facebook disagrees to some extent with me supporting the idea that that's what you do. Because I felt that was the appropriate thing to do. If you have an emergency, you act. If you have an emergency, you act. Mr. Turnquist now suddenly has suffered a reawakening. As far as he's concerned, it's okay now for the government to borrow funds to resolve the country's energy crisis. He's not saying privatize anymore. He's not screaming the so-called verbiage of privatize. Suddenly, he's now been checked. He referred to the crisis at BPL within a few days ago as an inconvenience. But that can't work. You can't have your cake and you eat it. You can't privatize, and support the objective of privatization and still think that you're going to develop this country. This country is about Bahamians. We have to stop apologizing about that. And black Bahamians got to say, you let me down. And white Bahamians got to say, you ain't taking care of me. You see, for the first time in our history, I believe white Bahamians and black Bahamians agree. That's interesting. This headlong desire to privatize our country under the umbrella of neoliberal economics, voodoo economics, under the umbrella of voodoo economics, is now destroying the lifestyles of our people. So do we blow a hole in the national budget to fix this? Well, one thing is clear. And I try to be fiscally prudent also. One thing is clear. And I take Mike Larry's point. And I accept it. I'm going to just read something before I take a quick break, and we're going to come back and perhaps invite you to call in and share your comments on Facebook. We're going to try to see how we're going to respond to those. It appears on the face of it Mr. Smith's comment is a reckless statement. In reality, my opinion is that it's a very responsible one. I accept that there is a need for fiscal responsibility in the management of our affairs. These are my words. I question the utility of such an idea in the circumstances in which we now find ourselves. Years of neglect have brought us here. These are my views. These are my words. Successive governments have chosen this chaos, the BPL, BEC chaos, against the background of the many opportunities and options we have in terms of alternative energy. Years of neglect have brought us here. Successive governments have chosen this chaos rather than a true reform of the energy sector. That's it. Oligarchs, people who seek to hijack BEC, BPL, to maintain their dominant position in the terms of providing fuel services to our national grid. Oligarchs such as them and corrupt politicians keep us tethered to maintaining a corrupt, costly, fossil fuel dependency. The average Bahamian is not responsible for this state of affairs, and neither should he or she or we suffer to further enable it. The collective did not cause this advanced state of decay. We ain't caused this. Errant managers of BEC, BPL, politicians have caused this. The collective did not cause this advanced state of decay. Consequently, unreasonable methods should be employed to protect our people against its effects. BPL, BEC, is this the final conflict in the energy sector? Now, for those of you who've been listening in, I hope you found this to be useful in terms of explaining the background as to why we, Fayne Thompson, persons like me, oppose this principled headlong plunge into the privatization of BPL, BEC. Because I believe that this is what this is all about. And we're being softened up. We're being forced to be so upset with this that at the end of the day, we are going to feel obliged to agree to anything they suggest. And if they suggest the continued dependence of fossil fuel usage, that is what we're being softened up to accept. Green energy is where we must go. Alternative energy is where we must go. Graham Wellford and fellows like him got it right. Milan Turnquest and fellows like him got it right. They have it right. They have been pushing this country to consider seriously a transformation of the energy grid from one which is based upon fossil fuels to one which is powered by sun, sand, and sea. In the sun, solar. In the sea, tidal wave. Sun, sand, and sea. In the sand, there's a oragonite has many abilities, many qualities. To my people, to the Bahamian people, I can only say to you today, you have to be prepared to raise almighty hell. You gotta sue BPL, BEC. Take actions out against them. Challenge them. Make them account for the lousy provision of services. Multiple civil suits in the magistrate court and in the Supreme Court. Intimidate them, harass them, and they will stop. Now they've blinked, supposedly, because I understand that today the announcement is that the so-called load shedding will end or will be suspended. But there's no guarantee of that. But it is promised that this is going to be suspended. I stand to be corrected. I still look forward to your support, by the way, of the work that I do. You will not hear the views that you will hear from me anywhere else in the talk show industry. You're not going to hear it from the fellow who seeks to always justify the work of the government. You're not going to hear it from the fellows who want to personalize politics. Because to tell you the truth, it's unfair to be personalizing politics when it comes to FNM or PLP politicians. They are there to do the bidding of the IDB, the IMF, and the World Trade Organization. Theirs is the responsibility to simply collect a check, to enjoy crumpet and tea over Paradise Island with foreign investors, and that is the passion that they are motivated by. If you want to be a new breed Bahamian, a green Bahamian, one looking forward to a better day, you're going to have to decide. You will have to decide to take a different course. We're going to take a break right now, and we're going to be back, and we want to encourage you to call in 556, I think it's 6894-465-0131. If there's a post that you wish to make, questions that you have, I will do my best to answer some of them. Don't allow the big words to frighten you. And if you are frightened by the big words, you know how the Bahamians. Bahamians can take on any situation. Neoliberalism, look it up. Privatization, look it up. Because we don't use the language of the voodoo economics which has been practiced on us for the past 20 to 30 years. We allow the politicians to come every time around and talk about the budget this and the budget that, and they never explain to you what is the philosophical basis upon which they make their decisions. You know why they don't explain it to you? Because they don't want you to challenge them on it. We have been the victims of a vicious imposition of neoliberal economics, voodoo economics in the Bahamas for the past 30 years. And only now are our people beginning to talk about it. We'll be right back. Let's take a break at this time. If I take a break now, do I lose them? Do I lose people? Welcome back. Fayne Thompson here today, and as we move forward to make this platform more useful to you in terms of the information and the material that we will present, we want you to understand that this will be coming to you because of the support that you give us. So we ask immediately for you to tune in when we're on Facebook, when you see us on YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Call in, share your comments, let us know how you feel. Post comments to the Facebook page. Let us know how you feel. It's going to be important because I'm going to start a new conversation that you will not hear in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. You will not hear. In fact, this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, has been raging on Facebook for months and for years. I've met some people on Facebook who I am convinced are some of the most visionary Bahamians who most of us have heard nothing about. They've not given me permission to call their names, but they're visionary. So I know that the argument is out there. People understand what I mean when I use the word neoliberalism. They understand when I use the word privatization. They understand these words. The working man needs your assistance. He or she has to be able to say to the politician when he knocks on the door, no, but you want to sell my country out. That's not what I want. You can't offer me a job if you can't provide control over our economy to help us. These are some of the important things that we need to teach our people. Read Bahamas, read. Teach Bahamas, teach. Because people must understand. They must understand the simplicity of the idea. No matter how big the word is, the simplicity of the idea is, don't go to the beach, occupy BPL. Don't go to the beach, occupy BPL. People understand that. Don't sell our things, employ us, make us first in our country. Bahamianization. People understand that. This is where we must begin to teach and inform and to rejuvenate some of the most exciting ideas that created this modern Bahamas. I would not be who I am today were it not for majority rule. I keep telling people that. In many ways, I have had the best of the Bahamas. And I also say that too. But this is important. This is important. We must seek to understand and to inform and to self-inform, so that when BPL comes again, we know it's coming. So that when they talk about privatization again, you would have seen that book by Naomi Klein. You would have read the book, The Shock Therapy. You would have read that. You would have understood what this is all about. This is a practice which has been going on with governments over the years. You don't hear PLPs talking about neoliberalism. You don't hear FNMs talking about neoliberalism. You don't hear them talking about privatization from an ideological and from a philosophical point of view. Any government that wants to privatize the Commonwealth of the Bahamas any further is treasonous. Simple as that. Treasonous. There are no protections being left. In fact, the audacity of it all is that Mr. Wyner was able to say there are no more protections, and that's why he thought we should join WTO. You see the challenges of BPL, BEC, and the challenges of BTC, and the challenges of the WTO are all the same. They're all the same. They are different sides of the same conversation. And we must teach our people this. You see, some of us getting older now, and there's a legacy. The only thing we can do now is try to leave good legacies. But we must also appreciate that our people do not understand what it means when we say that BPL BEC is the same as BTC, is the same as WTO. They are manifestations of a desire to sell, and sell to develop the Bahamas. An idea which has been debunked in Latin America for 30 years. Ideas which have been rejected around the world. The IMF chair as herself said, that the practice of neoliberal economics, voodoo economics, is undermining developing countries. You see, I can't personalize anything when it comes to Desmond Bannister. He's my friend. And it's not Desmond Bannister who is the culprit. Please let me make this clear. It's not Prime Minister Minnis who's the culprit. Please let me also make that clear. The problem is they are practicing a set of economics that they do not understand, which have been advised to them and set upon them by international agencies whose only interest is facilitating the opening up of our economy to companies from the north and foreign direct investors with no responsibility, no reciprocal responsibility to provide for the enhancement of our people. I've said enough. But I'm going to be back. But we need your support. So let's get that number up again. We need your support. And we want you to tell me if this kind of material is what you want. This is not a mainstream media. We're not going mainstream. We're going Fayne Thompson. 5566894. Viber only. 5566894. 4650131. If you can text us. And so forth. On Facebook, you can reach us. We'll be on this forum, on this platform, and we hope to expand our platforms, but we need your support. So when we tell you we need your support, take it very seriously. I'm going to say this to you, that this type of material you are not going to hear on the local corporate media. You will not hear it. Most of the reporters will not get permission to even talk about it. To draw the links between the years of neglect of BEC, the sale of BTC, the WTO. You will not hear this conversation. They don't understand the linkages. Now, before I go, there's an article that I want it's called, Mr. Producer, see if you can pull up Arnando Garcia and Elizabeth Martinez. What is neoliberalism? Arnando Garcia and Elizabeth Martinez. It's an article online. I just want to read a few things so that I can share with you some final thoughts before I depart. Elizabeth Martinez, what is neoliberalism? Pull it up for me, please, Mr. Producer, and then leave it at the background. Give us a larger font so that people could read with me. Elizabeth Martinez and Mr. Garcia. Arnaldo, I think his name is Garcia. What is neoliberalism? See, people don't get scared of this word. I'm trying to bring home and to tie up all the so-called linkages so that you understand what we are dealing with in 2019. You see, if If my work in this regard is to be productive, more of you must come on board to understand the ideological onslaught which has been leveled against us by international agencies, and etc., etc., etc. Elizabeth Martinez. What is neoliberalism? Elizabeth Martinez. Try that. Yeah, Elizabeth Martinez. And the reason why I want to pull this up as a final thought, there you go. Bingo. There you go. The reason I want to pull this up is because you're about to learn some incredible stuff. You see, a lot of people do not understand. You see, I'm a trained lawyer. I'm a barrister. No one can take that from me. I'm a barrister. No one can take that from me. All right? I'm a trained barrister. British trained barrister. No one can take your hard work and your education from you. No one can. But aside from being a barrister, I was always interested in things that impacted our lives and which made the wheels of government and the engines of government and the economy go. So in many ways also I'm a political economist. Don't let that frighten you, ladies and gentlemen. Please read. Please do what I see my friends and brothers on Facebook are doing. They are teaching themselves, etc., etc., etc. 20 years ago I couldn't have this conversation with you because most of you would suck your teeth. Nowadays you're curious to know. It's been pulled up by the producer. Mr. Producer, thank you very much. Something I must read. I'm going to just read through. I'm going to read through all of this, Mr. Producer, so that I can explain very quickly what we are dealing with. I'm going to tell you that the monster of neoliberal economics is upon us. You've never heard this before, and you ain't going to hear it nowhere else. The monster of neoliberal economics is upon us. That is why we are fighting to save BPL BEC and seemingly losing the battle. That is why we are being insulted by BTC's executives and seemingly losing the battle. That is why the audacity of Mr. Pitstock in the Guardian or Tribune 2 days ago is such that we are now considering retooling ourselves for this fight for the WTO. All these things are happening because Bahamians do not understand the tools with which they must, the tools or the weapons which they must use to engage this fight. You see, I'm tired of sitting around in groups with people who basically most of whom are only into their egos. People must understand what is going on. So neoliberalism is a set of economic policies. Give me a bigger font, Mr. Producer, if you can. Neoliberalism is a set of economic policies that have been widespread during the last 25 years or so. Notice I did say the last 25 years or so. Although the word is rarely used in the United States, you can clearly see the effects of neoliberalism here as the rich grow richer and the poor grow poorer. You're not going to hear this on ZNS Guardian shows anytime during the day. And you're not going to hear this. You're not going to hear this. And they're not going to explain it to you. Liberalism can refer to political ideas or even religious ideas. Well, I'm not going to deal with that one paragraph. That's not important. Let's go to the next paragraph. Neo. Neo means we are talking about a new kind of liberalism. Bring it up for me, please, Mr. Producer. Bring it up for me. Neoliberalism means that we are talking about a new kind of liberalism. So what was old kind? Bring it up for me, Mr. Producer. Bring it up for me. Yes, yeah, bingo. Thank you. What was the old kind? The liberal school. Okay, that's great. Now let's go. Okay, the liberal school. Okay, stop right there. Neo means we're talking about a new kind of liberalism. So what was the old kind? The liberal school of economics became famous in Europe when Adam Smith, a very well-known Scottish economist, published a book called The Wealth of Nations. He and others suggested that the abolition of government intervention in economic matters. He advocated the abolition of government intervention in economic affairs. That's very important for you to know because it is through the government that many new countries, especially in the Caribbean and the developing world, were created. It was created under the auspices of the intervention of the government, the conscious intervention of a government to achieve certain events. And the Bahamas is no different. No restrictions on manufacturing, no barriers to commerce, no tariffs. He said, this is Adam Smith, free trade was the best way for a nation's economy to develop. Such ideas were quote-unquote liberal in the sense of no controls. This application of individualism encouraged free enterprise, free competition, which came to mean free for business people, capitalists, to make huge profits as they wished. Economic liberalism prevailed in the United States too. I'm not going to deal too much with the particular United States, save and except to say that the whole purpose behind this article, otherwise known as corporate watch, is that it analyzes how governments make a decision to invest the people's money. And the idea supposedly that there should be smaller government is a very dominant idea in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, so much so that we believe small government to the point where we believe that government should have nothing to do with the economy, save and except simply provide the context within which the economy operates. But we know that that's a madness. Let's go down a bit more, Mr. Producer. We're almost done. The main points of neoliberalism include, let me read them very quickly. The rule of the market, liberating free enterprise or private enterprise from any bonds imposed by the government, the state, no matter how much social damage this causes. This is important. I am a believer in free enterprise with a conscience. But the practices of successive governments over the last 20 years is free enterprise without a conscience. Free enterprise without a conscience. Untrammeled market fundamentalism. Greater openness to international trade and investment as in NAFTA and WTO. Reduce wages by deunionizing workers and eliminating workers' rights. That have been one of many years of struggle. We've seen that trend also in the Bahamas. Under the Employment Act, they say in around 2000, there was a great hue and cry of the way in which the economy, the so-called the rights of workers were liberalized. No more price controls. All in all, total freedom of movement for capital, goods, and services. To convince us this is good, they say an unregulated market is the best way to increase economic growth, which will ultimately benefit everyone. It's like President Reagan's supply side economics, for which he was well known when he was president of the United States. So we have that first point. The second one, cutting public expenditure for social services. Well, we've seen in the Bahamas also this push to try to minimize the responsibility of our government in certain important key sectors of society. For example, national health services. There's no reason why a modern Bahamas, a civilized Bahamas, should not have NHI in place by now. It is just unthinkable and inexcusable that the Turks and Caicos Islands has NHI. Most Caribbean countries, which are smaller and are not doing as well as us, have NHI, and we don't. Deregulation. The government must be reduced. That is to say, you reduce regulation of everything that could diminish profits, business, including protecting the environment and safety on jobs. But we've seen that. The Commercial Enterprises Bill, the Immigration Act. These are means by which our society is being deregulated. What do we mean by deregulation? Remember now, every economy is regulated to the extent that we seek to protect the interests of the Bahamian people. To the extent that deregulation poses certain obligations on international companies, there's a tremendous push, especially by the WTO, especially by the IMF, especially by the Development Bank, to minimize the extent to which we regulate businesses coming in and out of the Bahamas. Now, all supposedly at the altar of free movement of goods and services, which we know in a real world has not worked anywhere in the world. It's never been practiced anywhere in the world. And when you hear people like Peter Turngo's talking about privatization, you must take them to task. What do you mean, Minister, when you talk about privatizing and deregulating this country? What do you mean when you talk about trickle-down economics, Mr. Brent Sumner, when you said that somehow trickle-down economics will work? What did Mr. Winder mean when he says that government will no longer be able to protect our people? These are the linkages between the many things which are going on in this country. You see, today I only use BPL. To establish this conversation so that you can understand this conversation. Because the most important conversation is how do these things all link together? There's no linkage that's ever been set. This will be the first time in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas you would have heard this conversation. And that's why this show that we're going to get up and running is so important for you. And you have to support us. Because the mainstream corporate media will not support us. I can let that sink in. Mainstream corporate society will not support this type of show. Privatization, eliminating the concept of the public good or community. All of those particular concepts are key and important parts of the so-called agenda to liberalize, to privatize societies in the developing world. I pause there. Powerful institutions like the IMF and the WTO practice these ideas, and they are fundamental to the existence of these organizations. So we have to be vigilant, because the whole idea of the Bahamas being a sovereign nation is still important today. As important today as it was before. Now, I've spoken for a while. You've given me an opportunity to come into your lives on Facebook and to share with you today. I want to continue this show. I want to continue this material. We are not going to be supported by the mainstream media. You have to support this. And whichever way you find it necessary, either in writing support, contacting us, etc., 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 we're going to be reaching out to you to support this type of material. My material is going to be completely different. I've decided to come back to this conversation, to the national conversation, because it's still maturing. I've watched over the past 20 years persons who do not understand even what the so-called WTO was all about have become experts in that area. There are many Bahamians who can sit down and explain to you what these type organizations mean for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas from the point of view of our sovereignty and the development of our nation and our future. Climate change is challenging the very way in which we must think forward to develop the Bahamas. Because if the glaciers continue to melt, then the sea level will rise. The Bahamas is top amongst 10 countries in the world who are threatened with sea level rise. So much so that by 2060, 2080, parts of the Bahamas which are now above ground will be underground. So we face some serious existential challenges as we move forward. BPL, BEC is but a part of the general conversation. I started with BPL, BEC because I want to bring you into the conversation. But you must now understand at the end of this conversation how big the conversation is. Let's fix the Bahamas. That's what a good friend of mine says. Thank you very much for this time today. And have a good day.